Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Foundation Fridays live stream. My name is Antonio Cotronio, and I am the Director of Technical Content Strategy here at OmniSci. And today, I and Danny are going to be walking through a few different methods for actually creating and loading tables inside of OmniSci. So before we get started, this is our second stream in this Foundation Friday series. And just so if you haven't joined us before, what we do in the Foundation Fridays is we're going to be going over really any kind of like foundational piece of knowledge you would need to know or need to have to be able to get started with OmniSci, to be able to get going and creating your own visualizations and performing your own analysis inside of OmniSci. So we do these every single Friday. Again, this is number 2. Last week, if you want to give that a shot, we're going to have that up on our Resources Center on the website very shortly. And what we did in our first session was deploy OmniSci using the AWS AMIs. And so what we're actually going to be doing today is using that same instance that we deployed last week, and we are going to be creating and loading some tables in those instances. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and welcome in Danny. What's going on, Danny? How you doing today?
Not much. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to everybody. I think that's one of the things I like about these streams is I know that we're close to the weekend. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is real quickly, these are the instances that we stood up last week inside of AWS. So we have the live streams instance, which we stood up, and the SQL import instance, which we stood up this week in preparation for today's stream. And I'll show you why we actually have two. We're going to be using one of our Java utilities to actually do a SQL-based import of data across database instances. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and actually do some really simple data creation or table creation and data load inside of OmniSci. Okay. So we're here inside of OmniSci. We're actually going to be using OmniSci free for this. If anybody's interested in trying this for themselves, you can go to omnisci.com and sign up and get a free license key to try out OmniSci, perhaps in AWS as well. All right. So we'll see here in this instance, we actually have a few different tables already created. And the thing I think we should kind of like start with is actually if we just look at a table itself. And so this is a table of just flights from 1 year. There's 7 million records in this, and it has 56 different columns. The reason I want to start with what a table already looks like inside of OmniSci is to actually just talk about the actual data types a little bit, because if we're going to create tables, we need to know the type of data that we want to actually have within those tables. And so there's obviously many of the common standards that you would experience inside of a SQL enabled database. We have some different integer columns inside of this table. We also have a dictionary encoded string in this table, and we're actually going to be using quite a bit of those today. Having a dictionary encoded string within OmniSci is going to give us the ability to do different types of joins. It's also going to give us the opportunity to create charts based on this individual column and use this for instance as a bar chart measure and dimension, so that we can actually look at unique classes, or in this case unique carriers of for an airline carrier. We also have in this table some timestamps. So as you may have some time-enabled data. That's something that OmniSci deals with very well, is doing performing both space and time based visualizations and analysis. And so you'll see some timestamps, you'll see some dates and things like that. So and then also obviously your floats and other perhaps values that have decimals within them. Okay, so this is just what a table looks like once it's been created and it's already stored inside of OmniSci DB on the back end. So let's actually bring some data in and see what that looks like. All right, so a couple of the bare bones way to get data into OmniSci is actually going to be once you've logged in. When you first log in, you're going to see this screen. It's going to show you the dashboards that have been created thus far. So we'll come over to the data manager. This is where we see all those tables. We have this little blue button up here. All right, that's the import data button. If we click that button, you'll immediately see a few different options. One of those options is going to be import data from local file, and this is going to be your kind of classic drag and drop method. So this is kind of the easiest way, the least amount of friction to get data in. So if we just click here, or perhaps we already have a finder already open, and you have like a CSV or a shape file, maybe some GeoJSON, something similar. And you want to just go ahead and click and drag that in. In this case, we're actually going to navigate to the data sets that we want to bring into OmniSci. We have a Marvel database here. A few weeks back, we did a really cool video in preparation for the Shang-Chi release. We're going to actually use these. They're a little bit smaller tables, so it'll be easy to manipulate and move around. So we'll use these today to sort of demonstrate how this process works out. So we have these CSVs. Let's go ahead and we'll select this characters table. So you'll see, like, as soon as we select that, loads up the CSV, brings that into the data importer, and then we have this preview button in the bottom right hand corner. We click that, we're immediately going to be presented with essentially what is in the inference of OmniSci on the table that you've provided. So it's going to provide the column name, and then what its inferred column type or data type is going to be, and then gives us the opportunity to add a different title, and then let's say that we were like importing a TSV or something else, and we actually wanted to change perhaps the like inferred delimiter on the table that you've tried to ingest was not automatically detected. That's typically not the case, but let's say for this example that it was. You can come in and change that if you'd like, or maybe the table that you brought in had header included as the top row. We can make sure that that's set as well. If it wasn't, then we can turn that setting off. In this case, everything looks great, so I'm gonna go ahead and close those. And what we have is a character ID and a name here. I'm actually going to change the data types for both of these. So for the name, I'm actually going to make this a dictionary encoded string right here, and that's going to give us again the ability to either join on this name or use it as a primary dimension or measure in some of the charts that you may want to create later on. And then I'm also going to do the same here for the character ID. So these are both going to be dictionary encoded strings, and then we can go ahead and import the data. You can see it was imported. This is our table. So if we actually go back to the data manager, we'll see our new characters table here. And then similar to when we were looking at the flights, we will see the character ID and the name and its data type for each of the columns that's inside of that particular table. All right. So should you always be doing that? Like, should you always be switching to dictionary code? Because from what you said, it sounds like there's more like benefits to it, right? So that's, I would say there are some edge cases in OmniSci where you would want to have it just be a string value. But I would say the majority of the time when we're bringing string data in that we want to use in the manipulation of other tables, or if we want to use that particular column to sort of drive a chart, then we're going to want to make that a dictionary encoded string data type. It's not always the case, but it's something that's a little bit more unique to our system, and something that I would recommend that people use, particularly when they want to use that chart as like a kind of the linchpin of their visualizations and their dashboards. That's like, I'm going to use you sort of as a sounding board here. So like that's a good question. Are any other questions that you have specifically on like the drag and drop methodology of bringing data into OmniSci?
Oh, it's all looking good.
All right.
All looking good.
All right, cool. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to I'm actually going to pull up here real quick I believe, because we have, like I said before, we have two different instances stood up. So I'm actually going to pull up real quick our terminal here. And so one of the things we want to do is perhaps we want to actually do some to load that CSV via SQL. And that's another common way that we may want to actually load data into OmniSci. So the first thing that I'm actually going to do here is I'm actually just going to look at the different Docker containers that I have running. When we deployed last week the OmniSci AMI on AWS, that deploys in a Dockerized environment. That's what it looks like here. You can see there's 3 different containers running: one for the web, one for the backend, and essentially one for the Jupyter Lab instance that's deployed alongside of OmniSci. So we're actually going to be using this this container right here, this 507, and I'm actually going to go ahead and just bash right into that instance. So once we're in, I can actually come up a directory, and you'll see this OmniSci storage directory here. And so if we actually come over to that OmniSci storage, oh yeah, maybe use the change directory command, Antonio. Okay. So let me jump over here. All right, and then inside you'll see a few different things. We're gonna actually want to go inside of this data directory, and you'll see this mapd import. What I've already done is I've securely copied those same Marvel tables, those CSV files. I've actually securely copied those over to the server so that we can actually do some of this manipulation. And I'll show you what that looks like. So let's actually jump inside of there, and you'll see the Marvel database down here. Let me clear this, make this a little bit easier to see. All right, so these are each of the tables that we have here. So we can, and we just, this character's CSV is the one that we just drag and dropped into OmniSci. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna create this table using SQL first inside of the SQL editor, and then we're going to use the copy from command to actually go ahead and grab this from the mapd import directory of OmniSci storage, and then bring that directly into the database, and then we'll be able to see that table in the data manager. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're actually going to want to create the schema for this table directly inside of OmniSci. So let's go over here. Let's go over to our SQL editor, and we're actually going to create this. I want to create one of the larger ones. I think they'll just be a little bit easier to kind of talk through. Here, I have each of the schemas over here. So let's go ahead and grab one, and then we could kind of walk through what this looks like. So when you create a table, when you're just creating the schema inside of OmniSci, what you're going to have is just the create table, and then the table name, and then you're going to define the entire schema. And so you'll go column by column, similar to what you would do with another database. And then once you run this, it'll create that empty table container that will then copy into. All right. So in this particular table, we have the Marvel characters info. That, in this case, is going to align perfectly to what we have inside of the CSV in our mapd import that we're looking at in the command line. So here we have our ID, which is just going to be a small int, name, which is going to be is not. We should actually change that. Now that I look at that, that should be. So we'll go ahead and change this. This is actually, we're going to take this same encoding, and we're going to, instead of saying encoding none, we're going to do a dictionary encoding on that as well. Alignment, gender, eye color, and again, these are all for different Marvel characters, and we'll go ahead and create our table. So now that we've created the table, you can see that that's over here in our table browser. If we open that up, we can see all of the columns that we just created. And then over here we have, the type that it is. And here, just inside of the table browser, just gives you whether or not it's categorical, if it's a numeric, so on and so forth. So the next thing that we would do is we're actually going to use this copy from command, or this call. And so let's go ahead and open up a new line here. And I'm actually going to, this is going to be based off of these components, right? So we have copy is how we're going to start. We're going to say copy into which table are we going to be copying into. So that's going to be this table that we just created, the Marvel characters info. And then where is that from? And that where is that from is from that OmniSci storage mapd import directory that we had. Here, let's jump back over there real quick. So this is that folder. So if we just look at the directory, so this is the directory that we're actually pulling from, and then this is the Marvel characters info is this CSV file right here, right? So if we come back over and we run this, so really quick, right? I mean, not a crazy number of rows that we're working with. Now, if you had really large CSVs, maybe that takes a little bit longer, but I would say that this method of ingestion or loading the table itself is actually quite performant, and I use it all the time, building out demos, building presentations, whatnot. This is a great way if you have some directories of folders of CSVs that you want to bring over. Really easy way to get data in. Obviously, when working with some enterprise data, and that's one of the ways that we're actually going to look at that here in a few minutes. If you're working with larger enterprise data that you have in other databases, other enterprise systems, you're probably going to want to use a different method of ingestion. But if one of the ways that you need to get data in is just some flat files, this is a really easy way, and I highly recommend giving that a shot. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at a couple other methods real quick. Actually, let me open this in another tab so we could see. So now you could see when we open up our data manager, we have the Marvel character info. This is what we just we created and then loaded into, and then we have the characters table that we did our drag and drop before. All right, so I actually want to call attention to this comics table right here. So this comics table is I already loaded this into OmniSci beforehand. So this is actually, we're going to use now the OmniSci instance that we're looking at currently to sit in for an enterprise database that we may have within our organization, right? So this could be another instance of OmniSci. This could be Postgres, SQL Server, MySQL. This could be perhaps Hive. So we have like any number of other examples. Actually, let me pull that up real quick. So you could see over here Google BigQuery as some examples. Actually, that was the only one that I missed. So so what we're going to use now is we're going to use our SQL importer, which is a Java utility that I'll go and navigate to so you can see where that is. And so that's a utility that's going to be a JDBC style utility that we're going to use to reach into another database and pull data from that database and load it into OmniSci. So this is actually going to be the source in this case, and our secondary OmniSci instance. Here, let me go ahead and log back in here. This instance here, which you can see does not have the comics table in it, is going to be basically the sink. This is going to be where we're going to bring that comics table from the other DB, and we're going to bring that into this database. So to do so, let's navigate back here. I actually have another. This is this other machine that we're looking at right now. You can see over here. This is the SQL import machine. I've already SSH'd into this box. And what we're going to do now is we're going to navigate over to that SQL importer utility. And am I actually inside? No, I'm not. So let's go ahead and bash into this Docker container. So this is we're now in the Docker container for the SQL import machine. You can go and grab and all that is, and actually let me jump out. So I did that a little quick. That doesn't help anybody out. So all we're doing here is we're actually just taking the Docker container, and let's actually do it like this. So if we go sudo docker ps, This is going to give us all the Docker containers that are currently running on this machine, and then so you could see that. Let's see which one. This one right here. This 292. This is the Docker container ID that we want to use to actually jump into the Docker container, which is essentially one level of abstraction, if I could speak, from the actual machine itself. So if we jump in, so now we're basically just executing that. We're jumping into the Docker container, and let me clear that up. All right. So if we look at this, I believe, yeah, if we go. Yeah, okay. So we are just inside of OmniSci bin now. So we go ahead and pull the directory. This is just OmniSci bin inside of this Docker container. And you'll see this OmniSci utility 5.7.1.jar. So this is going to be the utility that we're going to use to jump in into the other OmniSci instance, grab that comics table, and bring it into this one. Again, the syntax is going to be a little bit different depending on the database that you're pulling from. So if you're pulling from Postgres or you're pulling from BigQuery or SQL Server, for instance, there are going to be slightly different syntax. So I would recommend actually taking a look at the right here. Actually, let me show you where this is. So this is, I'm flying all over the place. This is the SQL importer docs page. So this is within the loading data with SQL from the command line section of our documentation. Really great documentation. Highly recommend reading this if you're going to go through this process. And look and find the database that you're interested in loading from. We're actually going to be pulling using, this is the OmniSci DB example. We're going to be using this as our primary driver. This can be sort of our guiding light in this case. I'm actually going to pull this over so you can see what it looks like real quick. All right, so if we're here inside of bin, clear this up, and let me. So this is the utility right here. So this is the command that we're going to use. So this is just going to be calling that utility, that 5.7.1.jar. We're going to be calling that, and we're essentially going to be using the SQL importer component. And to start, we need to provide the actual username and password for our current instance. And we're just using the defaults right now. So this is really vanilla version, but it'll help us to kind of talk through the process. So I have our username as admin. We have our password as hyperinteractive, ! And the DB is OmniSci. We're given the port that we're going to use on the machine to pull the data across, and the table in the other database that we're going to be looking at. The other instances, admin and password, and then over here you see the actual kind of JDBC call, which is going to be to OmniSci, the IP from the other machine, and then we essentially have here at the end is like a select statement that we're going to use. I'm just pulling everything. Select star from comics. This could be a very specific query that you want to run to pull things across. And there's also if your table that you're pulling across is, let's say, I think if it's OmniSci to OmniSci, the default limit is 100,000 rows. So, but you can change that by adding another clause here to say limit and give the entirety of the data set. In this case, this comics, I think this is only 41,000 rows or something like that, so it's well within the bounds. If we run this, it's gonna run. It's looking at. You can actually see. So let's walk through what happened. So it went into the other. It made a connection to the other OmniSci instance, and then it created the table. Because we didn't already have that table inside of the instance that we were loading it creates it for us. It takes all of the schema from the other database and then does the ingestion into that table. So it creates and loads the table as part of that SQL import process. All right, so if we actually go now back into the instance and we refresh, you'll see now that we have the comics table here. It has the 41,000 rows, and each of the columns with the corresponding column types from our other instance. So if we come over here, you could see it's the exact same table. And this is, so again, this is the SQL importer, and it has, it's a really powerful tool and utility that when bringing data into OmniSci, you can get really creative and use this in some interesting ways. Again, pulling, maybe you don't want to pull a whole data set. You want to pull a part of a data set and run a more complex query here at the end of the here. Actually, let me clear this so we can look at it again. So if you want to run a more complex query, you would just do that here in this part of the actual call. So, Danny, I know that was a ton. I know that we just ran through a ton, but any questions on that exactly?
Yeah, I think I'm following. Would you actually be able to import another table real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's actually just use this right here. So let me go find one from the other from the database real quick. Let's just say here. I'll need to.
Yeah, like I want to move like characters, for instance.
Yeah, let's do characters.
Yeah.
That's actually perfect. Let me just copy that name real quick, and then I'll just show. This is what we're going into, and we'll jump back to the terminal. All right, so let's go ahead and this is going to be characters here. So we're selecting everything from characters, and then we also need to come up to this part of the call. See, this is the table, again, right here, that we want to actually go and reach into the other database to grab. So before it was comics, now it's going to be characters. So let's remove that, and characters, and then that's it, because nothing else changes because we're still going between the same two instances. So we run that; it does the exact same process. Goes and pulls that and brings it in. We could do it one more time with the Marvel characters.
Why not?
Yeah. So like here, let's reload this page, and you'll see now that we have the characters in here as well. Let's say we're like this Marvel characters info. Let's do that one. All right. So we'll just change the name of the table in the query, and then also in the table that we're going to be pulling from in the other instance. Again, everything else is the same, using the exact same username, passwords, database, and ports across the board. All right, boom. So now if we come back to our instance and we refresh, we'll see that table right here. Any questions on that piece?
Oh, looks good.
Yeah. This is like when we work a lot with our enterprise customers, this is a really common way. Like, let's say that they have a large like Postgres instance internally, or maybe they've invested in another database that they want to use. And this is a great utility to pull that data across. In the future, we're going to have some other ways of getting data in as well. We'll touch upon those when that comes. For right now, these are all really great ways to jump in. So, all right, let's actually look at a couple other ones. We'll look at a couple other ways. We're actually going to focus on AWS S3 buckets as our final method for ingestion for today. And if you are unfamiliar, there is a open data registry within AWS. Wow. Where you can actually go and search through a number of different data sets that they have, like publicly available, some really great stuff. So when I demonstrate this capability, I like to, there's a First Street Foundation flood summary statistics data set that's aggregated at different levels of geography that I like to pull in just to show how this works. So we have a way to do this from the UI, and we also have a way to do this from the SQL editor. So let's go ahead and do it from the UI first. And actually, before we do that, let me actually show you what this looks like. Let me go to my local machine, and there's a really nice command line interface for S3. And one of the things that we can do is actually just go and look at the contents of an S3 bucket. So in this way, we're going AWS S3, and we're just listing everything that's inside of this instance. So we have this is the bucket name is the First Street Climate Risk Statistics for non-commercial use, and then this is the actual path inside of that S3 bucket. If we open this up, it actually lists out everything that's inside of that specific path. There's some other things in there, up a couple directories, but essentially what we're going to be doing is pulling this county level risk CSV into OmniSci. All right, so let me jump back over to here. So within the UI, we're actually going to go ahead and point to the region where the S3 bucket lives. And that's just, in this case, it's US West 2. This is what's set by the actual creators of the bucket. So this is the First Street Foundation. They made this directory. This is where they set the primary region. Okay, and then we're going to give the bucket name. And so the bucket name is going to be, this is exactly what we were just looking at in the command line. So it's the same deal. And then the path is going to be that end part, which is going to be this version 1.3, and then the name of the actual CSV itself. You can go much higher. Let me hover over this. You can leave this blank, and it'll ingest everything in there. For the sake of this conversation, I'm just going to do one of them. But we could theoretically go ahead and actually ingest everything that's inside of the bucket. Actually, if you all were with us on Wednesday, when we had Kyle Pinnell on, and he was talking about bringing in all of that NOAA weather data from all of those different years, and each year was separated by a different CSV. Well, he could have pointed that because that was also in an S3 bucket. He could have pointed at a higher directory here or from the SQL editor and pulled all of the CSVs in one fell swoop. Okay. In this case, we're just going to be doing the one. There's no access key or secret key here because this is open public data. So we'll come in here, we'll preview. And what this is going to do now is it goes and reaches into the S3 bucket, pulls that CSV, and similar to the way that we were looking at when we first did that drag and drop, it's going to bring us here. And we're going to actually look at the inferred data types for each of the columns that are inside of that bucket. I'm just going to change this one right here to a dictionary encoded string. That's just the FIPS code, which is just the individual county ID. It'll be easier because there's a leading zero there that kind of is a problem if you use some of the other data types. Let's just leave it at that. And then there's all the different columns that are inside of that CSV are brought in as well. We'll leave the name the same, and we'll go ahead and import data. And you can see all of the different columns that were inside of that data set, and all of the data types, the number of rows, the amount of time it took, so on and so forth. So one other way that we can do this is from the SQL editor, and it's going to be a really similar workflow to what we did to create the table schema up front and then copy into. There's going to be a little bit of a different syntax. We'll walk through that right now. Real quick, Danny, do you have any questions on what we just did there?
So if you go back to the UI real quick where the importing is, so if you just let the path as the slash, you put it imported every single CSV like that. Right?
Yeah, I think there was 3 in there. So yeah, let me jump back over here. So yeah, it would have pulled these 3 CSVs right here. Yeah, just those 3. Mm-hmm. All right, let's see. Jump back over. All right, let's go to our SQL editor. All right, and then I already have the schema for this, so we're gonna pull this over, and so this is the exact same schema that we were just looking at from the data manager, and I'm just giving this a new name, so it's a bit different. But if we come back over here, so this is the table that we just brought over from S3. These are all the same. We're going to use the same schema essentially for this next one that we pull in. We're just going to give it a different name. So this is that same table. Let's go ahead and run this. It creates the table. That's that new county level flood risk that we have here. I'm going to actually just clean this up so it's a little bit easier to see. So once we create that table, then we are going to use a similar syntax as the county from, or the copy from. Here, let me format this so it'll be a little bit easier to see. So here it's going to be copy into the table that we just created. And instead of from being, like some type of path that's on the machine itself that we're looking at, we're actually be looking at the S3 bucket. So we're providing here the S3, the link to the S3 bucket, which is here. And then at the end, we're just giving, using this with statement, we're just going to then point to the region that it's in. The other things that we could do here in similar fashion is if, like, let's say this was a whole list of county level risk CSVs that we wanted to pull in, we could leave this. We could leave this off, and we could use some wildcards, for instance, and pull in all the CSVs. And then also, if this was a like a secure bucket, something that wasn't publicly available, there would also be the option to add the secret key and the secret. I always forget this. The access key and the secret key. So basically, we'd be able to add these. So you could think about all of these, different components that we're using here. This is essentially the exact syntax that we are using right here, and then including the with the region, right? So like region, bucket and path, access key. So it's going to be the exact same thing here when we use the copy from, and if we run our query, it's going to go and do the exact same thing and go and load those directly from the S3 bucket. All right. Whew. That's a lot. Do you have any questions on that? I know it's really similar to the other method. I just wanted to make sure we showed both.
So this is like a similar, like a two-step process, right? First you have to create a table, and then you have to load stuff from the CSV into the table that you just created, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. That makes sense. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's literally like the exact same like input fields as the AWS.
The UI. Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah, only difference is you're creating the table up front, and then like loading into that table from your link. All right. So that is everything that we have for today. I know that was a ton. We covered a ton. Let's review actually real quick. So when we started, we knew that we wanted to create and load some tables in OmniSci, and to do so, we use a few different methods. We can actually start from the beginning. We started with the simple drag and drop. So we went and we did simple drag and drop, which is just the import data from local file, drag our CSV in or our TSV or our shapefile, what have you. The second method that we did was to have data securely copied to the server and to create the schema, to create the table schema, and then copy from the path that's on that local server that we copied to. And then the next method that we did was the SQL importer utility. And then the final method was we showed both ways to use the AWS direct loading paths, which is both from the UI, the OmniSci front-end UI, and from the SQL editor. So I think this is a really good one. I think this, like, a lot of people are going to get some value from this. Obviously, the first thing that we do when we get into OmniSci is we want to get data in, right? So, and these are some great methods. Does this cover everything? Absolutely not. There are other ways of using the SQL importer, like we saw. Maybe you have Kafka streams that you want to ingest into OmniSci. That's going to be a different utility. Perhaps there are even some more even more unique ways that you want to get data in. One of those we saw on Wednesday of this week when Kyle showed us how to ingest data directly from his Jupyter Lab, from his notebook that he had. So there are any number of ways to get data into OmniSci. If you do have any questions on any of that, please, you can go to you can find us on LinkedIn, on Twitter. You can also ask questions on our community forums, which is just if you go to OmniSci.com and go find the community in the navigation bar, and you can go to the community forums and ask us questions there. You can always hit us up on socials as well. As always, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I will ask to hit that little subscription button. Give us a little thumbs up on the video. Danny, am I missing anything?
No. If you want to be up to date and know whenever likes are going, you can also turn on the notifications of that. That way you know not only when we have new uploads for anything, but when we go live. But I mean, we're on a pretty consistent schedule. It's every Wednesday and every Friday. So keep that in your mind and you'll be chilling.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you all, and we will be seeing you. We're actually going to be taking next week off. We actually have a webinar next Wednesday on wildfire risks and impacts in the state of California that I'm going to be running. And that usually runs during this time slot. So we're actually going to be taking next week off. We'll be back on the live streams the following week. But thank you all for joining us today, and we'll be seeing you real soon. Peace.
Have a good weekend, everybody.